should write it yourself. It's good practice.
Anton Chekhov once said, "If in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired." In writing that concept's known as Chekhov's gun, George R. R. Martin has said something similar, quote, "You know, I don't like to give things away, but you don't hang a giant wolf pack on the wall unless you intend to use it. So we should expect a giant wolf pack in the Winds of Winter or in A Dream for Spring." George R. R. Martin has already used this technique before. One example is with Sir Davos Seaworth. Stannis appointed Davos his hand, so every day, Davos frowned over scrolls and parchments and great leather tomes and tried to puzzle out a few more words.
Me.
Davos learned to read. Davos then saved Edric Storm from burning, which pissed Stannis off.
Sir Davos Seaworth. I, Stannis, of the House Baratheon, first in my name, rightful king of the Andals, and the first men sentence you to die.
But then Davos saved his own life by producing a letter from the Night's Watch, which he had read during one of his lessons. This was a major plot point, as it caused Stannis to pardon Davos, and more importantly, it caused Stannis to sail north to win the throne by saving the realm. Davos learning to read was an example of Chekhov's gun, and it has already paid off. So that begs the question, what about the Chekhov's gun related to Wex Pike? Ironborn are not big into horses, but Theon was raised at Winterfell. So when Theon first got to the Iron Islands, he sought out a horse.
I'll find your horse.
As part of the price that Theon had paid for that horse, Wex Pike was given to Theon to serve as his squire. Wex Pike is dumb, not dumb as in stupid. In fact, Wex was a clever boy, evidenced by his gambling winnings. But Wex was dumb, as in Wex was a mute. Wex did not speak, and that has had consequences. Let's look at this scene here. Theon was reintroduced with his sister for the first time in years. Theon did not know who she was, but she knew who Theon was, and Wex knew who she was. So Wex knew that Asha was messing with Theon before they got to the castle. Eventually, her secret came out.
Yara?
So the very last thing that Theon said to Wex in the very first chapter in which we the reader met Wex was, "Next time, grow a tongue." Wex traveled with Theon, so Wex was there when Theon captured Winterfell.
He's Prince Theon now.
And when Bran and Rickon escaped, Wex was the one to figure out that they had doubled back on their tracks, further proof that Wex was a clever lad. Wex has seen Theon awaken from nightmares, so presumably Wex knows that Theon has regrets, such as killing Bran and Rickon, or rather, the Miller's boys. And Wex has always been loyal to Theon. As an example, when Sir Rodrik Cassel showed up outside Winterfell, Theon asked his men who would go and who would stay with him and fight. Young Wex was the first to cross that line and stand by Theon's side. Picture that. A young kid who can't even speak, and he was the first to stand by Theon's side. So of course, that made the other Ironborn men feel like cowards, and some of them joined Theon as a result. But always remember, Wex was the first to cross that line and stand by Theon's side. When Ramsay's forces overran Winterfell and they burnt it down, Wex hid up in the branches of the weirwood tree in the Winterfell godswood. So Wex saw Bran and Rickon, Osha, Hodor, Jojen and Mira leave Winterfell with the direwolves. Since Bran and Rickon had gone different directions, as per the dying advice of Maester Luwin, Wex had to make a choice as to who to follow, and he chose to follow Asha and Rickon, so he knew where they went, the infamous island Skagos, allegedly home to unicorns and cannibals. As of A Dance with Dragons, the last time that we saw Wex, he was at White Harbor with Robic Glover and Wyman Manderley. They told Davos that Wex had been learning his letters, and that he learned quickly. So it begs the question, is that another Chekhov's gun similar to Davos? Wex is a clever lad and he's been learning his letters. Did Wex travel to Winterfell with Lord Manderley and send off a raven to Castle Black? Did Wex write the pink letter? Let's take a step back and look at Theon's arc. Theon's arc in A Dance with Dragons is one of a broken man suffering from a form of dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. Theon's point of view chapters are some of the best to read, especially the first time through. 3 Reek chapters, followed by the Prince of Winterfell, the Turncloak, a Ghost in Winterfell, and last but not least, his final chapter in A Dance with Dragons, once again titled Theon. In this final Theon chapter, Theon had to not only overcome his own fear of Ramsay, but also Jane Poole's fear of Ramsay. And he did just so. Theon saved her. They flew. It's brilliant writing, and it's even better than just that. The very next time that we saw Theon was at the end of the Asha Greyjoy chapter titled The Sacrifice. Theon was brought before her, but his sister, Asha, she did not recognize Theon. That scene is a nice callback to their first reunion. The first time, Theon did not know who his sister Asha was, and this time, Asha did not know who her brother Theon was. But Theon knew who he was, telling her, "Theon, my name is Theon. You have to know your name." That's how the chapter ends. One last reminder that Theon's arc has been centered around his dissociative identity disorder, and how he finally beat it. Well done, sir. But Theon did not do it alone. There were a lot of factors that played a part. In the second Reek chapter, Ramsay had Theon reassume his identity as Theon so as to retake Moat Cailin from the Ironborn.
I need you to play a role. To pretend to be someone you're not.
Who are you?
Pretend to be who? Theon Greyjoy.
In the Prince of Winterfell chapter, Roose Bolton had Theon reassume his identity as Theon so as to falsely verify Jane Poole as Arya Stark during the White Wedding.
Who gives her?
Theon. Of House Greyjoy. Who was it? Who was her father's ward?
Events such as these unintentionally played a part in Theon remembering who he was.
Help me.
And throughout all of the Theon chapters, there were characters such as Roose Bolton, Lady Dustin, and Abel's washerwomen who spoke to Theon as Theon.
My name is Bean.
Your name is Theon Greyjoy.
All of those conversations also played a part, most notably Lady Dustin's chat with Theon down in the Crypts of Winterfell, where she got Theon to admit that he loves the Starks because he wanted to be one of them. That scene was obviously very important for him in terms of reminding him who he really is. But there was a key moment in his final chapter where Theon had the choice to go along with the plan and attempt to free false Arya, or to rat out Abel's washerwomen. He even thought about attacking them with his dagger. And in that moment, Theon had an internal fight between himself, Theon, and his alter ego, Reek. His identity as Theon won out, and George R. R. Martin explicitly told us why. Theon chose to be Theon because the old gods had known him. The old gods had called him Theon. What did George R. R. Martin mean by that? George R. R. Martin is referring to the mysterious voice that spoke to Theon in the Winterfell godswood twice. Twice, Theon heard a mysterious voice call out his name. The first time that Theon heard his name was after the White Wedding, a voice that seemed to whisper, "Theon." 2 chapters later, it happened again. The leaves of the heart tree were rustling his name. "Theon," they seemed to whisper. "Theon." And Theon chalked it up to the old gods knowing who he was. But is that true? Did the old gods speak to him? Well, the second time that Theon heard the tree say his name, it also said the name Bran. And for one strange moment, it seemed as if it were Bran's face carved into the pale trunk of the weirwood, staring down at him with eyes, red and wise and sad. Considering the fact that we know for sure that Bran Stark has been practicing greensight by using the Winterfell heart tree, it's pretty easy to assume that Bran spoke to Theon through the tree. And he very well may have. But, according to Bloodraven or the Three-Eyed Crow, you cannot speak to people that way. He knows because he has tried. So, if it was not Bran, who else may it have been? We have clues. The first time that Theon heard the voice, George R. R. Martin specifically pointed out that the trees were covered in fog. So, someone could have been hiding up there. And the second time that Theon heard the voice at the Winterfell heart tree, George R. Martin pointed out that a leaf drifted down from above, brushed his brow, and landed in the pool. In other words, George R. Martin has given us evidence to believe that whoever said Theon's name was hiding in that tree. And is there anyone who's known for hiding in that tree? Yes, Wex Pike, who, as we said earlier, hid up in that tree when Ramsay sacked Winterfell. The last time that we saw Wex, he was at White Harbor with Robic Glover and Wyman Manderley, and they told Davos that Wex had been learning his letters, and that he learned quickly. That appears to be a Chekhov's gun. But Davos has already paid off that type of Chekhov's gun of someone learning to read. What if Wex has gone a step further? We know that Wex is clever, and we know that Wex is able to learn. But instead of just learning to read and write, what if Wex has learned to speak? And he has done so by climbing back into that weirwood and calling out Theon's name. If true, then Theon's loyal squire, the young lad who was the first to cross that line and stand by Theon's side, he has now done what Theon asked him to do so many years ago. Wex grew a tongue. And in effect, Wex, the clever lad and loyal squire who has learned to spell his own name, has now saved Theon's life by helping Theon to remember his own name.